نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي واجعل لي وزيرا من أهلي ربي يسر ولا تؤسر وتمم بالخير وبك نستعين يا فتاح ربي زدني علما اللهم فقهنا في الدين اللهم فقهنا في الدين اللهم فقهنا في الدين ربي هب لي حكما وألحقني بالصالحين ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب آمين يا أرحم الراحمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Once again, we are doing the tafsir of Surah Baqarah, and inshallah today we will continue with ayah number 193 until 196. So let's go over the word to word meaning first, inshallah.
وقاتلوهم حتى لا تكون فتنة ويكون الدين لله فإن انتهوا فلا عدوان إلا على الظالمين.
وقاتلوهم and قاتلوا fight against whom them. So وقاتلوهم and fight against them حتى until لا تكون there is not kun like we say kuna like kun fayakun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says be and it is, right? To be is kun. So kaf waw and noon, to be. There is, and la takuna, there is not. So fight against them until there is not what? Fitnatun, fitna, oppression or zulm. Wa yakuna ad-deenu lillah, and becomes or is deen, the religion, lillah, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Li is for, and the word Allah. So for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fa then, in if, intahaw, they cease, from noon, ha and ya, nahi, like to stop from something. So from that this word became intahaw, and if they stop or they cease, fala, then two words again, fa, then, la, no. Then no udwana, the hostility, or no aggression, or no going up towards them, illa, except ala zalimin, against the people who do dhulm, people who are the zalimun, people who are the oppressors. So in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, fight them until there is no more fitna and until worship is acknowledged to be for Allah alone. But if they cease, then there is to be no aggression against them except against the oppressors. And this is continued from the previous ayah, from the last, the topic from the last week's discussion, but we'll talk about it inshallah. And then ayah number 194.
الشهر الحرام بالشهر الحرام والحرمات قصاص فمن اعتدى عليكم فاعتدوا عليه بمثل ما اعتدى عليكم واتقوا الله واعلموا أن الله مع المتقين.
Ash-shahru, shahr is a month, like between the two hilals of the moon, that's a month. So ash-shahrul haramu, the haram, the sacred, something that in which the things are prohibited which are not prohibited at the other times. So there's some extra prohibitions, there's extra sanctity to that time. So ash-shahrul haramu, the sacred month, bil shahril harami, is for the sacred month, wal hurumatu qisas, and for the violations, hurumat comes from the same letters, ha, ra and mim. Harama, something that is sanctified, something that is stopped, something that is said not to do something, and the plural of that of haram becomes hurum and hurumat, right? So and for the violations, there is a qisas, there is a legal retribution. Like we learned before, there's a qisas for, there's a revenge or a retribution for life, and here we are learning there's also a qisas for the violations against the sanctity of the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made sanctified, which is like the month, the sacred month is for the sacred month, and for the violations is a legal retribution. Faman, then whoever, for then man, whoever, i'tada, whoever transgresses or transgressed, Alaykum, from ala and kum. Alaykum is the harf of jar, and for the grammar students, harf of jar and a pronoun. So this is a jar majroor. Alaykum, upon you, all of you. Fa'tadu, then you transgress alayhi, on him. Bimithli, mithl is to be like something else, right? Bimithlihi, in the same manner. Ma'tada, as he transgressed, alaykum, upon you, right? Wattaqullaha, and fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from taqwa, taqaw. Wattaqullaha, and fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa'alamu, from ayn, lam and mim, to know something, to have ilm of something. Wa'alamu, and know that, what? Anna, that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ma'a, is with, al-muttaqeen, with those who fear him. So, and fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with those who fear him. So in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying fighting in the sacred month is for aggression committed in the sacred month, and for all the violations there is a legal retribution. So whoever has assaulted you, then assault him in the same way that he has assaulted you, and fear Allah, and know that Allah is with those who fear him. And ayah number 195.
وأنفقوا في سبيل الله ولا تلقوا بأيديكم إلى التهلكة وأحسنوا إن الله يحب المحسنين.
وأنفقوا, and spend. Anfiqu, we learned this word nafaqa before. It is also used in a negative sense. It is used for a munafiq, someone who keeps two holes, like a lizard in a desert who keeps two holes, and he goes from one and comes out of the other, right? So similarly, a munafiq is a person who is double-faced, who says one thing, but then he always keeps the other options open, and then he runs out as soon as wherever he sees opportunity, he runs that way. He's not like true to anyone. Literally, that's a munafiq. But the connotation is also something comes from one side and goes out from another. And in a positive sense, these words, nafaqa, in positive sense, it is also used for spending something, because you receive money from one side, or wealth, or some kind of talent, or some kind of time, or something that you have. You receive and you give it out of the other. Like you spend it in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this word is used in a positive sense many times in the way of spending. Like you receive and you give. Like it is not something that we held anyway. It was given to us, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us something, whether it's wealth, whether it's property, whether it's possessions, whether it is any kind of time, skill, talents, whatever, and then we spend it and we give it out of the other. Like we don't hold on to it like for dear life, because we know that Allah Ta'ala will give us more. And spend, wa anfiqu fi sabilillahi, fi, in, sabil, the path, Allahi, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in the path of Allah, right? Wala, and do not, tulqu, throw yourself, bi aydikum, be, with, aid is for hands, kum, your. So bi aydikum, three words, with your hands. Okay? And do not throw yourself with your own hands, ila tahlukati, ila, into, tahlukati, from halak, like we say halak, like usko halak kar diya, like something that is destroyed. So ila tahluki, ila tahlukati, that means do not throw yourself into destruction. Wa ahsinu, and do good, do ihsan. And inna Allah, indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yuhibbul muhsinin, he loves those who do ihsan, who do good. Again, just like taqwa is one of the very deep words, ihsan is also has many layers, like we said before. We've learned before in different parts of the surah before, and then we learned throughout the Quran as well. We see at different places the ihsan is shown. There are different flavors of ihsan, and it's again a very deep word. But only because of limitations of language, the only way we can translate is by good doers. But it means much more than that, obviously. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, and spend in the way of Allah, and do not throw yourselves with your own hands into destruction, and do good and do ihsan. Definitely there is no doubt about it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves those who does ihsan. And then ayah number 196, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim.
وأتموا الحج والعمرة لله فإن أحصرتم فما استيسر من الهدي ولا تحلقوا رؤوسكم حتى يبلغ الهدي محله فمن كان منكم مريضا أو به أذى من رأسه ففدية من صيام أو صدقة أو نسك فإذا أمنتم فمن تمتع بالعمرة إلى الحج فما استيسر من الهدي فمن لم يجد فصيام 3 أيام في الحج و7 إذا رجعتم تلك 10 كاملة ذلك لمن لم يكن أهله حاضر المسجد الحرام واتقوا الله واعلموا أن الله شديد العقاب.
Atimmu, tamam, to make something complete, and wa atimmu, and complete, al hajja, the hajj, wal umrata, and the umrah, lillahi, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, li, and plus Allah, lillahi, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fa in, and if, for here is and, in if, uhsirtum, you are held back, fama, then offer, istaysara, whatever can be obtained with ease. Like we say, yes, like inna ma'al usri yusra. Yusra is ease, right? So whatever is obtained with ease, minal hadiya, of the sacrificial animal. Sacrificial animal, the animal that we sacrifice is called hadiya, right? So minal hadiya, the of the sacrificial animal. Wala, and do not, tahliku. Tahliku is to shave, ru'usakum, your heads. Like this is referring to the rituals at the time of Hajj, when the men, Hajj and Umrah, when the men shave their heads off after completing the Umrah. So, wala tahliku, and do not shave your heads, hatta, until, yabluga, yabluga, to reach, balaga, like we say, that a child reaches his balagat, like when they become old, when they become mature and all of age, when they reach their puberty, they're called, he's a balig now, or she's a balig now. To reach some place is called balaga. It has those connotations. So, hatta, to reach, yabluga, to reach, hatta yabluga, until it reaches what? Al hadiyu, the sacrificial animal reaches muhilla. Muhilla is the destination, the place where it is going to be done halal, the place or the time. It is used for both. The muhilla is used for both those connotations. Until the time that it reaches, or until until it reaches its place of being sacrificed. Faman, then whoever, kana, is, minkum, min plus kum, min, among, kum, all of you, maridun, has a disease or illness, au, or, bihi adhan, he has an ailment, mir ra'sihi, ra, hamza, and sin is the head, and ra'sihi, his head, of his head, fafidiyatun, then a ransom, min siyamin, of fasting, au, or sadaqatin, sadaqa, charity, au nusuk, or a sacrifice. Fa'ida, then when, amintum, you are secure. Amin, like we say, like to be in peace, like itminan, or so amin, hamza, mim, and noon is for to be secure. Faman, then whoever, tamatta'a, takes advantage of, bil umrati, of the umrah, ilal hajji, followed by the hajj, fama, then offer whatever, is taisara, the same word that we learned before here, taisara, can be obtained with ease, minal hadi, of the sacrificial animal. Famallam, but whoever cannot, yajid, cannot find, fasiyamu, then whoever cannot find what? Cannot find this animal to sacrifice. Whoever cannot find an animal to sacrifice, and what does that person has to do? Fasiyamu, then a fast, thalathati ayyamin, thalathati, 3, ayyamin, days. Yawm is a day, and the plural of yawm is ayyam. So of 3 days, fil hajji, during the hajj, وَسَبْعَةٍ and 7 days إِذَا رَجَعْتُمْ when you return. You return here refers to return home. When you return, when you go to for a Hajj, so you do, if you don't find a sacrificial animal, you fast for 3 days during the time of Hajj, and then you fast for 7 days after you come back home from your journey after Hajj. Tilka, this, Asharatun is 10 days. So 3 plus 7 is a total of 10 days. Kamila in all. Dalika, that, liman is for the one who, lam, not, yakun is, ahluhu, his family, hadiri, hadir, we say hadir like I'm present, I'm here, hadir, like I'm here. So his family is present al Masjid al Haram in the area of or near Masjid al Haram. Wattaqullah and fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa'alamu and know what? Anna that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Shadidul Iqab, is very severe in retribution, in iqab. So here in this ayah, Allah subhanahu, it's a long ayah, but if we follow it bit by bit, then we'll get it inshallah. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, and first of all, complete the Hajj and Umrah for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. But if you're prevented from completing your Hajj and Umrah for whatever reason, then offer what can be obtained with ease of sacrificial animals, and do not shave your heads until the sacrificial animal has reached its place of slaughter. And whoever among you is ill or has an ailment of the head, making shaving necessary before this animal reaches the place, that means, then that person can shave their head, and but they will have to give a ransom of fasting for 3 days or a charity or sacrifice. How much we will learn later during when we discuss this ayah. And when you're secure, so here this stopping here refers to in a situation of a war or somebody, there's some enemy who stops you and they're not, you're not able to go ahead. And but when you're secure, then whoever performs Umrah during the Hajj months followed by Hajj, then whatever can be obtained of ease of sacrificial animals, they should do that. But whoever cannot find or afford this animal for sacrifice, because again, Islam is a religion for people of all kinds and all places and all kind of financial status. So some people might be able to afford a sacrificial animal very easily. For some people, it might be their lifetime of savings just to go for Hajj, and to be able to afford an animal might be very hard for them. So if you cannot find or afford such an animal, then fast for 3 days during Hajj and for 7 days when you return home, and this will complete your 10 days. This is for, and this instruction of doing Hajj and Umrah together when you go is for those whose family is not in the area of Al Masjid al Haram. And fear Allah and know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is severe in penalty or in punishment, in retribution. Inshallah, we'll discuss that ayah more when we come back to it. So here, first of all, we are learning in ayah number 193, وَقَاتِلُوهُمْ حَتَّى لَا تَكُونُوا فِتْنَةٌ وَيَكُونَ الدِّينُ لِلَّهِ. So fight against them until there is no oppression and the religion becomes only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if they cease, then let there be no hostility except against the oppressors. So first of all, is it possible to have a deen all over the earth only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So we learn, the Prophet ﷺ told us that there will be a time that this will happen, when there will be there will be only one religion all over the earth, and that will be at a time when Isa alayhi salam will come. And after that, like, there'll be a few events that will happen and everything, and then after that there will be a time that all over the world there will be all Muslims, all people will believe in one Allah alone, and there'll be a period of time in humanity, a few years, that will happen in which there will be, the deen will be completely there only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There'll be no other people on the earth, and there will be so much barakah at that time that we learn about that time, that even there'll be so much barakah and prosperity and everything on the earth at that time, because there'll be so much flourishing of everything that we will people have never seen before. So that kind of things will happen, and the deen will become all for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And this also teaches us that for us, for a Muslim, why does a Muslim go to war? War is a reality of life. It happens between communities, between nations, and between groups. But the reason why a Muslim goes to a war is very different from the reason why any other group might go for a war. The purpose of a Muslim going to war is for lillahiyat to be established, for the establishment of the kalima, for the establishment of la ilaha illallah, right? And when we have, like, we don't fight for money. We don't A Muslim doesn't fight for money, that they will, just because some people have a lot more money, then you fight those people and get those money. Nor does a Muslim fight for resources or oil or any other natural resources or diamonds or not for land either. They don't fight for any of these reasons. Fighting is not allowed in Islam. We cannot fight for any of these reasons. Only two reasons that are allowed for fighting is la takuna fitnatun, that there is no fitna. So until when there is an oppression going on in the land and everything, and so you just fight until that oppression is removed, right? That oppression is no more. And second, وَيَكُونَ دِينُ لِلَّهِ, and the deen becomes exclusively for Allah. What does it mean for a deen to be exclusively for Allah? That our obedience is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our worship is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, our lifestyle bears testimony to the fact that we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, that we obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His commandments, we do things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we live our life for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's very easy to say, because like some people say that, yeah, I will, we hear from a lot of groups and communities, and a lot of groups nowadays try to incite young people into things which have nothing to do with Islam, but they use the things from the Islam, and they use snippets from here and there in Islam to incite young people or new Muslims into thinking that, okay, you need to get up and fight, you need to do this thing and that thing. But the thing is, first of all, when you're doing something for the sake of Allah, it has to reflect in our lifestyle first. When a person, it's very easy to get very excited and very emotional and passionate and say, you know what, I will fight, I will do this, I will do that. But it is very hard to follow day by day commandments first, and to understand first what does jihad mean, what does qital mean, what are the conditions for it, and how to do it. Until you don't understand that, you can't do it. Also, if a person does not get up for fajr salah, then they're not going to be get, they're not going to be get to they're not going to be able to get up for things like jihad, which has a much harder thing. There's a lot of strife there, there's a lot of hard work that has to be done. There has to be so a lot of people, they become passionate about things like war. But in Islam, what we do is we try to avoid war as much as possible. As much as possible, we stay away from it. But if there comes a time that there is it cannot be stopped, or we have to deal with it, then we deal with it. Then we don't shy away from it either, right? So Islam allows war in conditions when, first of all, if an enemy has come and attacked you and you need to save yourself, so this is like a defensive war, right? So if we think of Battle of Uhud in the Sirah, and we think of Battle of Ahzab in the Sirah, at that time, what happens is, it's a defensive war. There's an enemy that has come to attack you, and they want to kill you. They're here to attack you, they're here to destroy you, and then you're allowed to get up and fight and protect yourself. And we understand that from our any intelligent person can understand that this is totally legit, and this makes sense. And to our fitra also, this makes sense. If anybody's trying to hurt you, then you have to, or take away your land or property or anything, you have a right to get up and defend yourself. Another kind of war is offensive war. And offensive war can be done, for example, when an enemy is planning to attack you, and before they attack, you attack them. Right? So, for example, Fatah Makkah or Battle of Tabuk in the Sirah. So, when the Prophet ﷺ came to know that the superpower of that time, they're preparing for war against the Muslim, like Heraclius and his people, they're preparing for a war against the Muslims. Then he did not, even though they were the superpower of that time, and the Muslims were not as big in number or in wealth, or having weapons and all those things, all the resources, the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslim did not get scared. They did not make excuses. They obeyed, and they went. Although the fight never happened, but they prepared their army, and they went there, and they waited for them for a period of time, and then they came back when they didn't show up, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put the fear of the Muslims in the heart of the enemy, and they never even turned up for the fighting. But the Muslims had gone prepared to fight, right? So that was an offensive attack. But then when you know that enemy is planning, before they reach your territory, before they even come, you go and attack them in to do an offensive, right? So in these cases, it is allowed, obviously. If you think about this, like in terms of children, for example, different children have different personalities. Like one child, maybe he goes to school, and there are a lot of bullies in the school, and he keeps getting hit all the time by this person and that person, and keeps crying and everything. And there's another child who keeps hitting others, right? So there are these two kind of children. One child who keeps getting hit all the time, the other child who's abusive to others and he's a bully and he's hitting others and everything. But there's a third kind of a child, which is a balanced kind of a child. What he does is, if somebody they don't hit anybody, but if somebody hits them, then they hit them back, and they're like, okay, they sort their matters in the playground or somewhere themselves, and they don't bring the matter, like not everything becomes an issue for teachers and everything, or the parents to sort out. They sort their matters themselves. So if somebody hits them, they hit them back. But if nobody hits them, they don't go ahead hitting people. So they're balanced in their approach. If you think of it like that sense, Islam is a balanced deen in that sense, that whatever, we don't go out and attack people for no reason at all, but if somebody comes, then we face it with full bravery and with full we are neither aggressive nor we are embarrassed of the words like qital and jihad, although these words have been used in the modern day in a lot of negative sense, in a lot of because just a lot of media attention on them, and then they've turned it into something that it is not. A lot of groups who identify themselves as Muslims and do things which are against Islam in the name of these words and taking these words, and they mislead our youngsters, and they mislead our new Muslim brothers and sisters. Or it could be also people who are Islamophobic, or people who are trying to demean the message of Islam, and they use this to to think. But what does jihad actually mean? Like, it is important to understand these concepts, because a lot of people, what they do is they will just pick up this one ayah, fight them until there's no fitna and religion becomes for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or they'll pick up the snippets from the previous ayah that, like we discussed last week, and they would say, see, your religion teaches this. But what they don't see is what is before and after. And if you just pick up something from a speech at the time of a war by a general, and you just pick up a snippet from that and don't take it in context, and neither see what he said before and after that, then obviously you can manipulate it, and that's the nature of speech. It can be manipulated very easily, right? So here, it is important for us to understand what are the terms when we say qital and what when we say jihad. For example, jihad means to struggle in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to struggle and in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we are traveling on the straight path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then whatever obstacles come in the way, to put our utmost effort into removing those obstacles. So jihad can be done against shaitan. Jihad can be done against our own nafs. For example, if I really don't feel like doing something, I really feel like sleeping, but it is time for Fajr, then I have to do a jihad in myself. I don't feel like it yet. I get up. It's a winter morning. I haven't had enough sleep, and like the bed's cozy. The duvet is very cozy and everything, and I really don't want to get up. But then I force myself to get up. So I did a jihad against my own nafs to get up and do wudu and pray my salah at that time, right? So that's a jihad against self. And jihad could also be against other parties, against other people, and it could be through the pen, it could be through writing, it could be through speeches, it could be through trying to spread the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it could be through debates, and at times it could also be through the sword, through an organized war, which is qital, right? So jihad actually does not mean qital. Nowadays jihad is used in the terms of killing, in terms of fighting, in terms of aggression, but that jihad actually is a term, is an all-encompassing term which includes a lot of things. It's not just qital. Qital is just a part of jihad as and when necessary, but a Muslim tries to stay away from it as much as possible. A Muslim tries to stay away from, misconceptions and hatred amongst people and fighting as much as possible. But when it's needed, he doesn't shy away from it. And the reason why a Muslim would do it, again, like we said before, is for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his deen. And even, like, for example, when the Prophet ﷺ would send people out for war, what he would do is he would ask them to go, and before you start fighting, even before you start fighting and the enemy is there, but go and invite them to La ilaha illallah first. And we learn that in the Sirah and many things. They go and invite them first, and if they accept Islam, it's better than, like, if even one person accepts Islam at your hands. There's a hadith to the effect of that, that if one person accepts Islam at your hand, then it is better for you than 100 camels. And 100 camels, at that time, we can think of it as 100 Ferraris or 100 Lamborghinis in today's time, equivalent to that. Luxury high-end cars, right? It was that amount of value, a camel at that time, right? So before attacking, even at the time of war, before attacking, they would try to they would try to stop it as much as possible. So they would go and give the message of Islam and say that if you want, then just accept it still and everything, and we just stop everything, and like there'll be no war, there'll be no nothing, right? So what does the life of a moment look like? The life of a moment is like they live of a life of shahada, and wherever they go, they give the message of the shahada, they give the message of la ilaha illallah, and they give the message of Islam. And if death comes to them in that path, then that death also comes with la ilaha illallah, right? Whether it is giving the message and doing things and to spread the message of Islam, or doing things to implement the message of Islam in their own lives or in the life of their close by circle, and then their communities and their families and their extended families and things like that. Or it might be even in this case, like in terms of an actual war. But again, like we discussed before, Islam does not give the permission to attack people who are, first of all, who are civilians, right? So when there is a war, then you will only fight people who are at the war front and who have come here to fight you, right? So you won't kill like you won't kill innocent civilians who are not trying to harm you. You won't kill, like we talked before, you won't kill. It's not allowed to kill women or children or priests or destroy property and everything, right? So that's not allowed. In today's time, what we see is it's not really bravery. If you look at the war of today, people like you uh, sit at one corner and you rain bullets at other people and everything. That's not bravery. That's not fighting something for the sake of Allah, or killing innocent people. That is never ever fighting for the sake of Allah, right? And also what we're learning that is, if they seize, then you stop as well, then you don't attack them. So if someone tries to seize and not hurt you and drops their weapon and seeks to seize, then a Muslim doesn't attack anymore. If somebody says no, I want ceasefire and I don't want to fight anymore, then you leave it as well, right? And we only have continue our action against those who persist in their aggressive behavior against the Muslim. And why is fighting mentioned so much here? And we are talking about the Masjid al Haram and everything, because if we think about it, the house of Allah, the Kaaba, it enjoys a position of being the center of oneness of Allah. And there is no room for any other religion in this land, because this land was built by Ibrahim and Ismail for the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Since the time of Adam alayhi salam until now and till the day of judgment, this place is the center of worship of one God. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it sanctified, this region, this place, right? And when there is no room for any other place here, then if you look at the seerah at that time, but what was happening there, people had put a lot of idols there. At the time of Ibrahim and Ismail alayhi salam, this place was used for the worship of one God. But over the years, people had introduced idolatry there, and people had introduced idols there, and idol worship and things like that had begun in this region slowly. And until now, at the time of Prophet ﷺ, there were over 360 idols in and around the Kaaba, right? So these idols had to be removed, and this war, this um, offensive that was started at that time, was for the sake of cleaning this land of Haram, cleaning it of persecution, because there was a lot of torture going on. Anybody who worshipped, first of all, these people had introduced idols, and then whoever tried to worship was Allah alone, for which purpose this whole place was sanctified and built. They would persecute them, they would torture them, they were not even allowing them to get in there, right? So the whole purpose was to clear this place of persecution and make this right faith of just worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gain ascendance there. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Ashahrul Haramu Bishahril Harami, that the sacred month is for the sacred month, and there's a legal retribution for all the violations in this area, in the Masjid al Haram area, and all the hurumat that they do, right? So what this is referring to is, in Islam, first of all, there are 4 months that are sacred months, right? So there's a place that is sacred, and we know there are 3 places. First, obviously, the Haram, Masjid al Haram, which is the Kaaba, which is a sacred place, and which is the place that we all turn towards. It is our Qibla. It is the place that we turn towards in our prayer every single day, 5 times a day. And it is also the place where we go for our Hajj and our Umrah, right? And other than that, there are 2 other sanctified places, the 2 other Haram that we have. One is in Medina, the Masjid al Nabi, the Masjid of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the third is Masjid al Aqsa. in Jerusalem, right? So these three are the sacred mosques for us. And obviously, the biggest and the most sacred is the Haram, which is also our Qibla. And other than the place, there's a time which is sacred time, and there have always been 12 months in the calendar since the earth and the skies were built. In Surah Tawbah, later on we learn Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that the months have always been 12. It is not a new thing. It is not a thing that anybody of us have invented or any human beings have invented. The months have always been 12, and 4 months out of them have always been sacred. And what are these 4 months? Dhul Qidda, Dhul Hijjah, Muharram, and Rajab. So the 3 months, 1 month is the month of Hajj, which is Dhul Hijjah, 1 month before Dhul Hijjah, and 1 month after Dhul Hijjah, and then 1 month of Rajab, which comes at another point. Why are these 4 months sacred? Because people in the older times, people used to travel. People had to travel a lot for Hajj, to take them many days and sometimes even months to reach to do Hajj, right? So these 3 months were the time when people were traveling to Hajj and coming back from Hajj and going back to their own places in the world. So these 3 months were sacred in the sense that in these months no fighting was allowed. You were not allowed to fight any person, and this was since the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam, that you were not allowed to fight in this time. You were not allowed to harm any traveler, because there was a lot of looting and there was a lot of things in Arabia that went on outside the haram. But in these months, everybody would kind of, all fighting would stop and nothing would happen anymore. And the month of Rajab. Why the month of Rajab? Because usually people would go for Umrah at that time, right? So the Hajj would happen at Dhul Hijjah time, and people would go in for Umrah. Umrah can be done at any time throughout the year, but this other than the time of Hajj, but people used to go for Umrah typically at the time of Rajab. So these 4 months were the sacred months in which people would travel for pilgrimage, and there'll be no fighting in these months. So they basically, these were safe months to travel for pilgrimage and also for trade. Like people would utilize it for trade time as well, because everything is safe, nobody is harming anyone and everything. And the Arabs, even before Islam, were so particular about this that even if a person saw their own father's murderer at the Kaaba during these months, then they would not do anything. They wouldn't even touch their own father's murderer at that time. Like it was allowed to do legal retribution. They were a society, tribal society, in which they would kill somebody back if somebody killed their father or their family member. They would kill them back. But if it was these months and they would see somebody near the Masjid al-Haram, they wouldn't even touch this kind of a person. So this is what was recognized by Arabs even before Islam. And what they used to do was, there was a practice of bidat that they used to do was, they used to change the order of months, and they call this practice nasi. What they would do is, they would say that, okay, you know what, this year we will have the month of Rajab come 2 months before, and this other month will go. So they would mess up the calendar and everything, because they wanted the Hajj time to be in winter, so that they could take maximum benefit and do a lot of trading in that time. The purpose was purely financial. Why would they change these months? Because if you the lunar calendar, as we know, is 10 days shorter than solar calendar. So the dates keep shifting, and sometimes a certain month would be in sometimes Dhul Hijjah would be in summer, and sometimes it would be in winter. But they would change the calendar and say that no, to this year we will change this, and we are the guardians of the Kaaba and everything. So they would change everything, and they say no, this year it would come 2 months before and everything. So what they would do is, after every 3 months in their lunar calendar, they would add another month, or they would change things, and so that the Hajj falls in winter time. And Hajj, for them, they had reduced it to a lot of functions and festivals and a lot of trading and everything, because people used to come from all over the world. So there's a lot of material and everything. So there is a lot of trading. They could sell a lot of things. They could buy a lot of things, and there was a lot of festivities around. It was more reduced from instead of using that time to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they were using that time, their worship had become nothing but, clapping and singing and festivities and a lot of trade. Although it is allowed to do some amount of trade when you go for Hajj, if somebody needs to generate some money, then instead it is allowed that instead of asking somewhere for money, you do a little bit of trade there. There's no harm in that, and we will learn later on about that limited allowance. But the primary purpose should be to go for for the Hajj and everything only, right? So what these people used to do was they used to do all this fighting and everything, right? And so um, the thing is, if in these, if we know from the Sirah that the Muslims went to do Umrah in the sixth year of Hijrah, they went to do Umrah at the time of Hudaybiyah, but they were not allowed to go inside. The people in the Quraysh, in the Makkah, and around the surrounding Arabs, a lot of them had got together just a year before, and in the Battle of Trench, and they had got together and they wanted to kill all the Muslims and everything, and they had, like in the Battle of Trench, the Ahzab, they had surrounded the city of Medina and they wanted to kill everyone, but although they were not able to, and they had to come back. But just 1 year after that, the same people who had come here to kill you, the Prophet ﷺ saw a dream that they were doing Umrah, and he got all the Muslims together. He got the Muslims together, and they went to do Umrah in the same city where there are people who want to murder them. So they went to them, and it was not an easy thing to do, right? To go there, and and obviously it's a sacred month that they're going in, but they don't know what is going to happen, right? And also at that time of Hudaybiyah, we know that they were sent back. They were not allowed to do Umrah, and they were told that you can come back next year to do Umrah. Now, when the next year came, again, when they are going, now the Muslims are getting ready and they're going, but now again, they are worried that if they go, what happens if these are the months of, these are the sacred months, and obviously we are not allowed to fight anyone, but we know what the Quraysh want to do. So if they attack us at this time, in the time of, in the sacred months, then what do we do? Do we let them kill us? Or are we allowed to defend us, right? So here what is being given is they're being given a permission that if they take out their swords even in these months, then you are allowed to do so as well, to save yourself and defend yourself. You should neither, first of all, you should neither start a fight nor you should exceed the limits so of necessity. So if it is required, you only fight as much as is required. You don't like go overboard and like you just don't go on a killing spree or whatever. If you fight, if you have to fight a little bit just to go in and everything, and once they surrender whatever, then don't then you don't need to harm them any more than this. Your job is done, then you just go and do your umrah and come back, right? So they were told here, the Muslims are being told, if you look at the context, that when you go there, if they don't, if the Quraysh, because the Kaaba was still under the non-Muslims at that time, right? The Muslims had not conquered Makkah yet, right? So there were still idols there was still Quraysh there, and they had the power over that area still. So the Muslims were told, you go and you do Umrah peacefully and come. But in case they don't regard this, because even in their custom, before Islam also, even in their custom, they would not fight it. But if they disregard that, if they put it aside, if they don't even stay true to whatever little bit they have left of the Deen Ibrahimi, if they don't stick to even that, then you're allowed to take out your swords, right? So that is what it is being told here. And then even in that, you do not transgress, right? So what we are learning here is Islam does not teach that if somebody oppresses you, the lesson for ourselves, like obviously we are not going there right now, this is about that time, but is there a lesson for us in our day-to-day life? The lesson for us from this in our day-to-day life is Islam does not teach us that if someone oppresses you, then you keep bearing it. And then you keep offering yourselves for even more oppression. That is not what Islam teaches at all. Whether this is at a community level, whether it is a family level, whether it is at an interpersonal level, or whether it is a national level. There is a balanced way to behave and interact in every relationship we have, right? So we neither abuse anyone, nor do we let anyone abuse us. And if somebody oppresses us and everything, we do our best to reduce that or and finish that oppression, right? And if we look at the Sira, which is the best way to learn how to be a balanced son, father, husband, preacher, reformer, citizen, worshiper, judge, a generous person, a devoted person, for all these things, we get a really good example from there. And at what times and how did the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, how did they behave and how did they, even in terms of oppression, how did they behave in terms of when they were others were trying to oppress them, right? And there's a hadith narrated by Anas radiallahu anhu, in which the Prophet ﷺ said, help your brother whether he's an oppressor or an oppressed. So a man said, oh Allah's messenger, I will help him if he's oppressed, but if he's an oppressor, then how shall I help him? And the Prophet ﷺ said, by preventing him from oppressing others, for that is how you help him. So in Islam we don't say that, you know what, what I will do is, I'll keep bearing and bearing things. I'll be like that, and I'll, I'm getting my Jannah because of it, and my Jannah will get confirmed because I'm like so. I'll keep like undergoing everything, and I have so much sabr. I won't say anything. I let the other person oppress me, and because he's keeping oppressing me, then because of them doing oppression again and again and again, they will go to Jahannam, and I'm just like being, in my mind sadistically happy about it or anything. No, that is not the Islam's way. Islam's way is, I don't want Jahannam for myself, and I don't want Jahannam for uh, for anybody else either, right? I try my best to protect even other people. So I don't let other people abuse me, because that is, or oppress me or people around me, because then they are falling into a deeper pit than they think they are doing. They think they're doing something, they're gaining some power or anything. No, they're not. They are harming their own akhirah and this life as well, right? So we don't, if we keep quiet when there is dhulm, when there is a lot of dhulm, and we keep quiet about it, we give the other person, and we like, even endorse it, or even like, give the person a little pat on the back if they did something, or if it was not good or whatever. What we do is, and we don't speak up against it, or we don't even express our displeasure. Now again, it might vary how much we are able to express, because it's not wise either to just go and put yourself in the harm's way. The Prophet ﷺ told us that when you see oppression, you have to, if you can, the best way to is to stop it by your hand. But if you're not able to do it with your hand, then stop it with your mouth. As in, if you're not able to stop somebody physically from doing some harm that they're engaged in, then at least try to advise them about it, and we at least try to advocate about this, and try to do something with your speech. And if you're not able to do that as well, then at least consider it bad in your heart, because and that is the lowest of iman. Because if you don't even consider something which is against the commands of Allah as bad in your own heart, then what is left of that? Then you don't even care about the commands. People are disobeying the commands of Allah, people are worshipping idols, people are doing things, and it doesn't even bother you. Then how are then that dhulm is not even bothering you, then where is that iman? Then at least it should bother us in our heart. Then depending on our different people, all of us have different kind of status, different kind of authority level, and different kind of abilities that Allah Ta'ala has given us. Some people, things are heard more, other people will listen to them more, some people are not heard at all, depending on what position we have in a society, in a family, in interpersonal relationship. Depending on that, we be wise, and we approach things accordingly, right? But we never transgress. So Islam does not allow us to do, uh, you know, to go out of our way and oppress another person or doing something wrong. And so, for example, if somebody cut your finger in a war or something, if somebody cuts a finger, then a person's allowed to cut back their finger, but only as much as your own finger has been cut. If you cut a little bit extra of the same finger, like he cut like just one, like our fingers divided into three parts. If they cut just one part of the top of our finger off, and we cut two parts of their finger, then we have done so, right? So we cannot transgress. We can only take retribution based on what has been done to us. Like we have to do other, like we have to do, even in taking revenge or retribution, we have to follow the boundaries, and we have to do only as much aggression as was done against us. We are not allowed to do more than that when we are trying to stop fitna, when we're trying to stop those things. And how will we do that? How will we, when the passions are high, when people are in war, when people are in things like that, then how can you stop yourself? The one thing that will primarily help somebody to stop their passions from taking over, and from staying within the boundaries of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not transgressing, is taqwa, right? Because what will happen is, it is the taqwa that will help a person, because they will remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching me. They will remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked me not to exceed any boundary, stay balanced, not to become extreme in either ways, right? I have to be very balanced, and that will help them to do taqwa. If we look at the previous few ayat, we are again and again and again getting the gift of taqwa from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like for example, we learned about Ramadan, and we learned that fasting, what's the purpose of fasting, is to gain taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When there is a war, then what happens with the war? to behave properly in the war, you need taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You need the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so you don't go all out. You don't destroy things. You don't do things which are not liked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now we are learning about Hajj and Umrah, and even in those we have to observe taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that will help us do things in the right way. If we imagine, for example, we are traveling to another country. What we do when we traveling to another country is we have a currency and we convert that currency into something else, right? And only after we convert it, we can buy things from there. So if we think about it, that taqwa is the currency of a moment. Taqwa is the currency that a moment has. And whichever way he goes, he just changes it into something else. So taqwa changes shape. Sometimes the taqwa manifests in shukr. Sometimes taqwa manifests into sabr. Sometimes taqwa manifests into courage. Sometimes taqwa would manifest into, stopping yourself. So taqwa will take many forms, and we can change it from one currency to another. We can get it changed, and if in that sense, it will change its shape in different places. But the bottom of it is taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa taala, and it is the taqwa that will help us do things properly. Then in the next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and spend in the way of Allah. And do not throw yourself with your hands into destruction. So, what is spending doing here? We're talking about war and everything. Because what happens is when we are inviting someone to the path of Allah, or when we are fighting with the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in both these cases, what do we need? Whether there is a dawa effort, whether somebody is being called to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's deen, in whatever way, or there is a war going on in which weapons are needed, warfare is needed, equipment is needed, food and resources are needed for the soldiers. Where will all these come from? You need wealth for this and everything, right? So we are being invited to spend and contribute to the causes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to spend in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because spending in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means is to spend for the supremacy of the religion of Allah ta'ala and for glorification of Allah's words, right? So we are, whether it is for knowledge, when we invest something at a proper place and resources so that knowledge about Allah's deen can be imparted to people and everything, right? That is also, we are spending for the sake of Allah, in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And it is not possible for someone to be serious in the way of Allah and not spend, because whatever we are really serious about, whatever we really love to do and everything, then we love to spend on that. Like, for example, if somebody is really into cell phones and they want like the latest cell phone all the time, they're happy to spend on it, because when the new cell phone comes, it is so expensive. Like the iPhone 14 is coming and they're so expensive, yet when somebody loves their phone, they don't mind spending that 1,500, 1,700, $2,000 on it, and again, because they actually queue up outside the Apple store to buy it, because they're queuing up early in the morning to buy it, because they just want to get it on the first day, and they're so excited by even giving all that money and getting that and giving up all their sleep and everything, because they're excited about it. That's what they love, right? So when somebody loves the way of Allah, when somebody loves Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they love the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they would love to spend as well. They would look for opportunities to spend in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And for a Muslim, when they spend in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they feel that much, they feel that much happiness that other people would get maybe for spending to buy some jewelry for themselves, or to make their home more beautiful, or to spend on their children's weddings or things like that. But a mu'min believer would feel much more happiness than spending on all these things, in spending in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So that's what would happen. And there is a incident related to this ayah, that what happened was that uh, in Ikrima says, there are two statements that are recorded. So first, Ashabi, he reports that this was revealed regarding the Ansar, that they stopped spending in Allah's cause. So this verse was revealed. So what happened was, when people migrated to Medina, and obviously everybody's sharing everything with each other. The Ansar are sharing all their money and resources with the Muhajirun. The Muhajirun have given up all their money and resources, and they're spending in the way of Allah. So as the Muslims started to get prosperous now, later they have sacrificed a lot. But when they started to get all this prosperity and money, and they're getting some war booty from other places too, Badr has happened already, and they've got all these things, then some people got together and they said, okay, we spent all this in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before, when our deen needed a lot. But Alhamdulillah, now we are getting all these things. So maybe now we should focus a little bit and rebuild our own financial status like it used to be before. So maybe, what we should do is, and they were all good, well-meaning Muslims, but their thought process was, and maybe what we should do is now we should focus a little bit on our trade and our business and everything, and we should build our businesses much more, and we should focus on that and build our financial standing and everything, because the deen doesn't really need us in that sense that much anymore. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this verse saying that by stopping yourself from spending in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never needed your donations or your efforts anyway. The deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be, like it's going to be victorious either ways, whether any of you invest it or doesn't invest in it, their time, their money, their resources, their power, their lives. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's deen was there, is there, and will always be there. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need anyone. It is for your benefit that you're being told to contribute in the path of Allah so that you can get a sadaqah jari, or so that you can get benefit out of it. So if you are stopping yourself thinking that the deen doesn't need you, the deen never needed you anyway. It is your misconception that the deen needed you. The deen doesn't need any of us. When we were not there, the deen was still there. When we will not be there, the deen will still be there. If we don't work for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, somebody else will do. And Allah ta'ala doesn't even need us to do his work. He has his own armies. He has, like if we look at the seerah, if we look at the previous stories of the prophets and other stories, we will realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can make things happen with the birds. Like the birds can take over the army of elephant. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't need any of us for anything at all. But it is his rahmah that he allows us to do something in his cause so that we can develop our akhirah, right? So stopping yourself from spending in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are actually throwing yourself into destruction. So no matter what you have, how much you have, try to spend a part of it, a portion of it in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's a saying from Ikrimah radiallahu anhu, that he said that it was revealed concerning the spending of wealth in Allah's cause. And it is also reported from Ubay bin Jubair that he said, the Ansar used to give charity and feed the poor as Allah willed. Then they were afflicted by drought for 1 year. Like for 1 year, there was no rains, and obviously their crops had dwindled. Their resources were very low and everything. So they stopped giving at that time when they were low in their resources. They're like, okay, when we have money more, when we have flourishing, then we'll give again. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this verse. So what this means is that whether you give a little bit or whether you give more, that does not matter. The point is that you give for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't mean that when you give, you have to give in thousands and hundreds and thousands, or you have to give extravagantly or everything. You give whatever you can from whatever Allah ta'ala give you. You give whatever you can. Wa ahsinu, and do beautiful, do things, do ihsan. What does ihsan mean? Ihsan means to give more than is required, right? To give more than is haq. The haq is something that is required, and to give more than that, to do something with beauty, to do something in the best possible way, to do something in beautifully, to give, when you give it in the nice way. Like for example, Aisha radiallahu anha, what she used to do was, when she used to give charity on her on the money, she would put some perfume on it, and then she would put it in charity. And she was asked once that, why do you do that? Why do you put the perfume on your money and then give it out in charity? And then she said that she said that, haven't you heard that the Prophet ﷺ told us that when you give charity, it goes in Allah's hand first before it goes to the other person. So I'm sending something in the hand of Allah. So I want to perfume it. I want to send it in a beautiful way. I want it to smell nice. I want it to. So they used to take care of things that we don't even think of in today's day. It's not just giving, but giving in a beautiful way, giving in a way that, like you put a lot of effort into it. So, for example, at the time of Battle of Tabuk, when a lot of resources were needed because the Muslims were going to fight the superpower of that time, a lot and lot of resources were needed at that time. So there were Sahaba who didn't have anything to give, and there was a Sahaba, what he did, he had absolutely nothing to give. He worked all night, and after working all night, he got a bag of dates, and he came and he put that bag of dates on top of that pile in which was being collected for the sake of thing. And the Prophet ﷺ appreciated that, and told that this bag of date is heavier than a lot of other things, right? So everyone, in a group, in a team, when something is done as a community, as an ummah, as a group, then everyone comes with their own skills, their own talents, their own resources, and they put it together and they get things done, right? And they do it in the best way, in the best effort. And for us, what does it mean to put our best efforts through ihsan? Is like whether I'm a student, whether I'm a teacher, whether I'm in my marriage as a wife, or whether I'm a mother, whether I'm a colleague. I try to do my best in everything. I try to do my best possible thing. I don't over exert myself, but I try to do things beautifully in the best way. And not like, if I give charity, I don't try to then show it off. I don't try to take a selfie and put it there and say that, you know what, I today I did this. Or I don't speak to my mom, but like once in a month, if I speak to her, then I take a selfie or record, oh, I spoke to my mom today and everything, and show it off. No, that is not doing good. Doing good is when you do good in a nice way, and we all know what nice is, right? And when we love someone, then we want to do things for them, right? And when we want to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we want to do things for His sake. And for, like, if we don't have that ihsan, if we don't have that thing, then we are depriving ourselves. And the best thing for a moment is, inna allaha yuhibbul muhsin. What is our motivation to do ihsan? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves those who do ihsan. And we all want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to love us. We all want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to not just love us, but love us so much that we are able to meet Him after the day of judgment. And we learn from Him that He says to us that I'm pleased with you and I'll never be displeased with you. And we learn from Mahdi that is the biggest pleasure of human existence. That is the biggest pleasure of that anybody would get. That would be much bigger even than the pleasures of Jannah. That when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say to us that, and I'm pleased with you today and I'll never ever be displeased with you ever again. And that Allah subhanahu, and even in this world we can prepare for it by doing what? By doing ihsan in our things. Ihsan in our things, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in the Quran, and He recorded it until the day of judgment. It is there for us to see that inna allaha yuhibbul muhsinin. So when we try to do something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we do it in our best possible way. Right? And then after this, in the next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about the Hajj and the Umrah. Because now that after Hudaybiyah, they're going for Umrah, and now they're learning things about, they did Umrah then, and then later on they're going to come back for Hajj. So what is going to happen, and how is Hajj going to be done, and everything. So there are different things that we need to learn, because the Hajj, as we know, Hajj was being performed since the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Ibrahim alayhi salam had given a call out for Hajj, that azan. He gave a call out for Hajj. And when we go for Hajj, what do we say? We respond to that call that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given through Ibrahim alayhi salam. And we respond to that call by saying what? Labbaik Allahumma labbaik, right? And we respond to that call saying, so that call for coming for Hajj was given by Ibrahim alayhi salam to all humanity that was going to come from then until the day of judgment. Right? And that call we answer through labbaik, right? And why is it called Hajj? Ha Jim Jim is to make an intention for something. Hajj, to make an intention of something. And what we do when we're doing Hajj and Umrah, we make an intention and we go ahead, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps us to complete it. Because if we think about the rituals that have to be done in Hajj and Umrah, it's not easy. It is very hard, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easy when we make our intention and go there. So what is Umrah and Hajj? First of all, Umrah is the pilgrimage to the house of Allah, which is the Kaaba. And when we go there and we do specific rituals there, right? And before we go there, what we do is, when we are on the way, when we reach certain points in our journey, we put on our ihram. And what does ihram mean? Ihram for men means they wear the two white cloths, and they bear one side of the shoulder, and they cover their body with just these two clothes and white cloth and nothing else. The point is that you are going to you're ready for anything, like even death, right? Because what happens when a person dies, when a Muslim dies, he's covered in two cloths, he's given a ghusl and covered in these two cloths and then buried. So literally, Muslim men, they're wearing the ihram and they're wearing the two white cloth, and which they're ready to, even if something happens, if they pass away, they can be buried in those same cloth, right? So they're, in a sense, they're preparing to meet with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after death, but they're preparing in this life itself. And for women, the ihram could be any clothes. They don't have to, obviously, women have the modesty of women is different in terms of the bodies of women, and men are different. So women are not supposed to wear these clothes. They can wear any clothes, but they basically they purify themselves and everything. They have a ghusl or whatever, and then they change into their clothes before when they reach their ihram, and the conditions of ihram become valid on them. So the condition of ihram, there's a lot of conditions. Like, for example, you don't put perfume on, you don't you for whatever days you have ihram on, you don't engage in any intimacy with your partner, and you don't cut your hair, you don't shave, and you don't cut your nails. There's a lot of things about ihram. Obviously, we can't cover them all here, but you put on your ihram, and then you reach there. And when you go there, what you do is you do the tawaf, which is you circle the Kaaba, and then after that you do the running between Safa and Marwa, which is called sa'i. And then after that, you either get, if you're a man, you either get your head shaved or cut, or if you're a woman, you just cut off a little end of your hair a little bit as a means of sacrifice. You basically you're commemorating a sacrifice, and then you can sacrifice an animal if you need to, and things like that. And Hajj is done um, on specific dates in which you also travel. And other than this, you also travel to Arafat and Mina and Muzdalifah, and there are special things to be done at these places. And Arafah, obviously, as we know, is the day of Hajj, in which people are at Arafah, and you make dua all the time, and it's the day of dua. It's the day of standing there and making dua. And Hajj was from the time of Adam alayhi salam until the Prophet sallam. All prophets did Hajj, but the current way of our doing Hajj goes back to Ibrahim and Ismail alayhi salam. And Hajj was happening since the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam. But with time, a lot of bidat were added. A lot of what is bidat? A lot of changes were done by people. Just like idols were added to all these places, they were not doing Hajj and Umrah for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anymore, or just for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anymore. What they used to do was, for example, they had changed the talbiyah. Like we say, labbaik Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika laka labbaik, right? So we say, here I am, Allah, here I am, and there is no partner to Allah. And they had added something there. They said, la sharika labbaik illa, right? And they had put illa, like there's no partner to you except the one who you have accepted as a partner. Like, what does that even mean? Except there's no partner except this, right? So they had made these changes, and so they were doing the Hajj and Umrah, but it was not for. They still believe that Allah is the supreme God, but they believe that Allah has made partners. That was the belief in Arabia at that time, that when they would really needed something huge, they would pray to Allah. But then when they needed something smaller and everything, they would pray to other idols, and they would say, these idols will talk to Allah for us. Like, these are the lesser gods, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the big God. May Allah forgive us. But these things they had added and everything, right? And even the customs and everything, they had changed things a lot. They started also, another thing they had started to do was, they started it considering a sin to do a Hajj and Umrah at the same journey, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala negates this in saying that there is no harm on you if you so in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala negates that there's no harm on you if you do the Hajj and the Umrah in the same journey. So nowadays, a lot of us, what we do is, when we go there, we do Hajj Tamattu. Like, the different kinds of Hajj. One is Hajj Tamattu. What does that mean is that you put yourself in the state of Ihram, and it is not easy to stay in the state of Ihram, obviously, because you're not combing your hair, you're not, so to stay in a long time, it's very hard. But Alhamdulillah, Allah Ta'ala makes it easy. But when you, in Hajj Tamattu, you put your Ihram, you do your Umrah, and then you take off your Ihram, and then and in the days of Hajj, you put your ihram again, and then you do the other things, like you go to Arafah, and you do go to Mina, Muzdalifah, and other things as well, right? So you put ihram in two cases, and because of this concession of in between, that you took off your ihram in between and then you re-put your ihram and everything, it is compulsory to do a sacrifice of an animal, right? This is you need to sacrifice an animal for that, and then whoever cannot sacrifice, then and it is recommended to do a sacrifice anyway. But if somebody is doing Hajj Tamattu, which is like you put ihram twice, and there were days in between that you were not in ihram, right? You didn't put just one ihram for both, then it is compulsory for you to do a sacrifice of an animal. But if you can't do, then you fast for 3 days while you're doing Hajj, and for 7 days after you come back home. But another Hajj is called Hajj Kiran. What is Hajj Kiran? When you take your sacrificial animal with you. Like in the olden times, we see, if you see pictures from olden times, if people were traveling from other parts of the world, they'll take an animal with them to sacrifice there. And that animal, and they would be in one ihram, and they would do the Hajj and the Umrah in the same ihram. Like they would not have the two ihrams, they would do like that, and that would be called Hajj Kiran. So obviously you're in the state of ihram for a longer time, and you have to maintain those conditions of ihram at that time. Another kind of Hajj is for called Hajj Ifrad, which is for those people who live in the limits of Haram, right? So those people who live in the limit, who have their families. By here, that their family is near Masjid al Haram means that their house, they live in that area, in Makkah, they live in that area, or in the vicinity of the Haram, then they are not allowed to do tamattu. They are not allowed to do Umrah and Hajj at the same time in this, because they can obviously do Umrah at other times. People who are traveling, it is for many people, it's a once in a lifetime journey that they're able to go there. And if they want to take out extra benefit from it and do Umrah as well and then do Hajj as well, then what this is saying is that allow them to do that. It's okay. So, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told it's allowed to do that. But the people before Islam, they had created this bidat that they would consider it a sin to do it at the same time. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here tells us that no, there is no sin, except the people who are in the limits of the haram, that's okay. They can do Umrah another time because they live there. So it's for them, it's easy to come anytime. But people who are coming from outside, who are spending their lifetimes of savings, or it is very hard for them to travel for whatever reason, but they manage this, they might not be able to come back again. So allow them to do Umrah and Hajj at the same time. Right. And then another thing that we learn in this ayah is that if somebody is stopped, like for example, and at the time of Hudaybiyah, when the Muslims were stopped for doing Umrah, but they had these animals that they were to be sacrificed and everything. So what did the Prophet ﷺ do? The Prophet ﷺ was, obviously Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired him, and then what he did was he said to all the Muslims, and he did it himself, was he took off his ihram there. They were not allowed to go there. The treaty was signed between them and the Quraysh that they will come back next year, but they were already in the state of ihram. They had made that intention. They had gone out from Medina. They had gone walking from Medina to Mecca, and they had their animals with them and everything for sacrifice. They were ready to pray and everything to do their umrah, but they were not allowed. So what they did was they came out of their ihram, and because they were stopped, they sacrificed their animals and everything, right? So whenever a person is stopped, then they can send it to haram. So if we think what they did was the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, they came, the Quraysh stopped them, the Muslims who were, raging, who must have had all this anger. They had been walking like it was not an easy journey. They walked all that way. Their legs were sore. Their legs were bleeding in many cases. They had gone through such a hard journey in a time when they didn't have that many resources or something. Yet these Quraysh had stopped them, which was never heard of in the history of. Nobody was ever stopped from going to Mecca to pray and to do tawaf and to do umrah and everything. They had stopped the Muslims, yet they were angry with them. Yet when they sacrificed these animals, where did they send these animals? To the Quraysh. Where was the meat distributed to? The same Quraysh. The same Quraysh who stopped them because they were in Mecca. They were the same people who got to eat from the meat that the Muslims sacrificed. But right, so they sent the sacrifices there, and they shaved their heads at that time, right? So men, usually men shave their heads after they do sa'i between the Safa and the Marwa. So here what we learn is when you are stopped from doing Hajj or Umrah by a political power, by something else, then you can send your sacrifice. And then once your sacrifice reaches that place, then you can shave your heads, and the trimming is allowed also, but shaving is preferable, right? So a lot of people, they don't want to shave their heads, and they want to just trim, and that is allowed. But preferred thing for men is to shave their heads off, right? And a lot of people, they feel that it will spoil their looks or whatever, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given this thing. But the preferred thing is that if men shave their head, and for women obviously it's not shaving their head, they just need to cut off just a little bit of hair from the end of their hair or something, and then just use that as a sacrifice, other than sacrificing the animal obviously. And if someone is sick, for example, at that time of the Prophet ﷺ, one of the Sahabas, Ka'b bin Ujra, what he had was he had a problem in his head. He had a lot of lice, so much hair lice that the lice were falling off his head and everything. So he asked the Prophet ﷺ what he can do, and he was in the halat of ihram. and everything. So the Prophet ﷺ for gave him the permission, and this ayah was revealed. He says, Ka'b bin Ujra, radiallahu anhu, he said this ayah was revealed regarding me, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told that I could shave my head, and in this situation, in this particular situation, he was allowed to get his head shaved off before the sacrifice had reached there. And but because he was allowed to shave his head beforehand for a specific reason, he had to make it up with what? With a fidya. Either he keep a fast for 3 days, or he feeds 6 people, or he sacrifices one animal. Right? So any of these things a person could do if they have to, if they get some sickness. And today's time, if somebody develops some sickness in their head because of some reason, and they need to do something, then there is fidya for that. And obviously, when in particular situations, we consult a scholar. And usually when most of us go for Hajj or Umrah for the first time, we go with a group, and we have a guide. We have usually somebody who knows and who guides us on what to do. And if we come across a certain situation, then we check with the scholars, and they guide us on how and what kind of a fidya can be given for certain situation if it is unavoidable, for instance, right? So what and again, what we learned here was that those people who are not able to sacrifice, who are doing Hajj Tamattu, but they don't find a sacrifice, they fast for 3 days and 7 days. So that makes a total of 10 days, right? And for those of us who don't go for Hajj, right, and we are at home, we didn't go for Hajj, what happens is one sacrifice is enough for the whole family. We can sacrifice one animal, and that's enough, whether we sacrifice in our own location, or we get it sacrificed internationally at some other location, so we go through another organization or sacrifice. That's either of them is fine, but we can sacrifice just one animal for the whole family. That's fine. When we are at Hajj, then every person should make their own sacrifice. It's a sunnah for every person to do their own sacrifice, right? And if that doesn't happen, then those 10 days of fasting is there, 3 days there, and 7 days when you come back. And again, like we learned, that this is for those people who don't live near the Masjid al-Haram. And if somebody is in Makkah region and they have no means to do, then this obligation, this need for fast is lifted from them. So they don't need to do this as well. Right? And at the end of it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that all of this, or there are this, and there's obviously much more. It's not just one ayah, there's many other things that we learn about Hajj and Umrah. Inshallah, may Allah ta'ala make us of those people that go to his house. He calls us to his house again and again and again. And for Hajj and Umrah, the Prophet ﷺ told us that do Hajj and Umrah alternately, like once you do Umrah, and then next time, if you can, if you have the means and you are able to, then do Umrah and then do Hajj, and then do Umrah again and do Hajj. Obviously, one time is obligatory for whoever can afford it, one time in their lifetime, but whoever can afford it more, it is encouraged to go again and again. And may Allah make us of those people who go again and again. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that all of this, all of these things and everything, you will, even this biggest, this huge ibadah, this huge worship, which is Hajj. What is happening in Hajj? The best place, the Muslim is the best condition of ihram. The place is the sanctified place. The time is the best time of the year, the best 10 days of the year, which is the time of Dhul Hijjah. And the person spending those time in striving for the sake of Allah, the best kind of worship. They're doing the tawaf, they're praying their salah, they're doing, and we know that the one prayer in Masjid al-Haram is better than a whole lifetime of our prayers, right? And just one salah there. So we are doing so much ibadah, but then behind all these ibadat, if taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not there, then there is no point on all of this. Like even it teaches us that in our religion there are two aspects of our ibadah. There is a physical aspect, there's a ritualistic aspect, and then yes, those have to be followed too. And there's a spiritual aspect too, that when we just focus on the rituals and the spirituality is not there, then the right intention is not there, right? So anything, whether we're doing fasting, whether we're doing Hajj, whether we're doing jihad for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever we are doing, the basis of all of that is still taqwa. Wattaqullaha wa'alamu anna Allaha shadidul iqab. And if you don't fear Allah, even if you're engaged in all of this, even if you're, and unfortunately we do find people engaged in different kinds of practices. One of my teacher and mentor, she said that when you're going for Umrah, don't expect to see Sahabas there. There are people there. Don't expect to see people who are much higher in iman, and don't get disappointed when you see people engaged there in practices that have nothing to do with Islam. Don't get disheartened, because those are today's people, of today's day and age. You won't find sahabas there at the moment right now, but don't get disheartened. You focus on your worship, right? Because as long as your worship is there, and you will find all kinds of people, there will be people with taqwa too, but not everyone will be like that, and don't expect to find everyone like that there. You fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you concentrate on your worship, and remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is severe in punishment. As long as we keep ourselves in that zone that we want to develop the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then inshallah, Allah ta'ala will forgive our mistakes, and we are human, we will make mistakes, but inshallah Allah ta'ala will forgive us, and He will grant us His pleasure. May Allah ta'ala make us of those who are invited to His house again and again. May Allah ta'ala make us of those who are able to balance our lives, who are able to live our lives in a way that we get oppressed by others, nor we oppress others ourselves. We are of those people who are courageous when we need to be courageous, and we are balanced, and we are soft, and we are gentle with people around us. But when our deen requires us to be firm and strong, then we are firm and strong as well. That we don't give in to the people who are trying to mislead us. We don't give in to the pressures, whether they are emotional pressures, whether they are financial pressures, whether they are physical pressures. That may Allah ta'ala help us. May Allah ta'ala not burden us with the things we are not able to bear, and may Allah ta'ala keep us, our iman, safe. And more than anything else, may Allah ta'ala be pleased with us in this life and also in afterlife. جزاك الله خير. آمين يا أرحم الراحمين. سبحانك اللهم أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت، نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.